good old civilized old Britain, the country of my birth, upbringing, education. I left when I was, what, 28 years old. I grew up in a half Jewish family. I don't mean they were Jewish half the time and you know, Mormon the other half. My father was Jewish. Very little anti-Semitism, of no particular import at all. Those people who may have had those views were generally eccentrics on the fringes. No one really cared. If anything, I would say a certain affection or sympathy for Jewish people as I was growing up. Different today? I don't know. My visits every year to the UK, I haven't noticed any particular difference, but some significant people are saying that life is becoming extremely troubling, difficult, challenging for Jewish people, particularly if they have an attachment towards the State of Israel. Caroline Glick, who's been on the show before, writer for the Jerusalem Post, fine writer, she was in a debate in the UK. She came away saying Jews should leave Britain. Well, possibly. Now Douglas Murray, who's a regular on the show, a fine writer, he has concluded, well, maybe she has a point. He joins us now from London. Welcome to you, my friend.
Very good to be back with you, Michael.
This is... it's important we get this in perspective and proportion. I understand there's a new wave of anti-Semitism in certain parts of England with a large Muslim population. It can be problematic. I know there's a certain anti-Zionism. But the idea that Jewish people don't have a future in the UK, surely that's too extreme.
I'm not sure it is an overstatement, Michael. I mean, certainly Jewish people generally, if they have no apparent orthodoxy and no apparent connection to the State of Israel, probably will get along just fine. But what is becoming concerning, and I think increasingly clear, is the way in which Jews in Britain and elsewhere are being tied to the State of Israel, and in a very negative way. Just in the last couple of weeks in Britain, we've seen a number of examples of this. Caroline Glick referred to the debate she did here in London about Israel, in which some very alarming things indeed came out. An extraordinary hostility against her and the other Israeli representative on her side. But then there was a case just a few days after that. We saw Holocaust Memorial Day, and just a few days before that, a Liberal Democrat MP of absolutely no distinction, who nobody had ever heard of before, suddenly issued a statement blaming the Jews for the Holocaust, effectively. I mean, he said it's unbelievable. He said that the Jews haven't learned the correct lessons from this and are still doing the same thing to the Palestinians. People questioned his timing. But it wasn't really the timing of this. It was the unbelievable misreading of history and the distortion of current reality that this man, a Lib Dem MP called David Ward, showed. And it's things like that. Now, a lot of people, myself included, speculated, was this MP using this for electoral purposes?
Yeah.
His own constituency is in the north of England, a very large Muslim constituency. And I think there have been simply some people who have questioned whether or not Mr. Ward, for all his unpleasantness, isn't just sort of seeing where the wind is blowing.
I think that's probably true. Where he is in Bradford, it's, if not majority Muslim, substantial Muslim population there. But surely what we should construe from that incident is actually say that this anonymous man who has made such statements, well, not quite as intense, but similar in the past, his party leader apparently was incredibly and visibly angry. The Prime Minister was angry. There was no support from most people in Parliament. He was roundly condemned for what he said.
Well, I mean, here's an interesting one, you see, because, yes, his party leader had previously allowed somebody who had said this and far worse to remain in the party for a very long time, until I and others challenged him about it. But there has been a current of people saying this sort of thing for a while. I think it's a bit harder for the Liberal Democrat Party now because, of course, they are in a coalition government. So there's a sort of element of embarrassment about that. But you come back to this thing. Are statements like this, when they come out, and they are coming out with increasing regularity on Holocaust Memorial Day itself, the Sunday Times published a cartoon which has been notorious ever since. Indeed, the proprietor of the Sunday Times, Rupert Murdoch, issued an apology unilaterally, as it were, for the cartoon. But this was a cartoon that came out on Holocaust Memorial Day by Gerald Scarfe of Benjamin Netanyahu building a wall of dead Palestinians, basically. it simply seems to be becoming the case that pieces of gratuitous abuse like this, that used to be pretty much the preserve of the Arab press in the current day and Die Stürmer and the Nazi press before that, has become mainstream here. Again, I mean, a large amount of criticism, as I say, Rupert Murdoch on that occasion rightly condemning a cartoon in one of his own newspapers. But this sort of thing really does slip by a lot more easily now. And the thing I'd say about this that's important is that a lot of people say, well, you know, the timing was bad and so on. It's not about timing, it's about facts. It's about the fact that if an MP or a cartoonist or somebody tries to, for instance, link the murder of 6 million Jews with what is happening in the West Bank, they're simply wrong, lying and deliberately goading people with history and claiming a comparison which simply doesn't exist.
Yes, yes, quite. There's an undercurrent here that I do find deeply troubling, and that is that the majority of Jewish people in Britain whose families probably came to the country between 1880 and 1900s. They've been there a long time. They've fought in wars for their country. They've paid taxes. They're abided by the law. They've achieved so much. David Beckham, iconic, you know, a Jewish grandparent. I suppose he'd be considered Jewish by many. They're having, to a certain degree, to prove their validity. And if they will condemn Israel, for example, well, that's okay. Well, they shouldn't have to make any statement one way or the other that they are who they are, just be accepted as British people. I think at least amongst a minority of people in the UK, that is being challenged.
Oh yes, I think it is, and I think it's not just in the UK, but in much of Western Europe, if not most of Western Europe, and indeed increasingly, I think, in North America. It's a pattern of thinking which sort of says, well, basically there are the bad Jews in Israel and the good Jews outside who are willing to condemn them. So the price of being Jewish and British, for instance, is that you simply have to show your credentials by joining in the general abuse of Israel. And I think that's an unhappy position to try to push people into. People shouldn't be held responsible for things that do happen, that happen to be done by people who happen to be of the same race as them on a different continent. But in particular, they shouldn't be expected to be held to account for things that people who happen to be of the same race as them are in fact not doing.
Yes.
And this comes back to the core of it, as I say, to blame people for something that is a lie.
That's very well put. Douglas, I very much appreciate your time, and also what you do. It's very important you make these statements. It's vital at this time. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure.